Apprenti Generation and WorkSource Tech Talk. My name is Marcus Knight, he, him pronouns. I am the founder of a company called Culture Perspective, which is an organization that helps with Black and Brown founders through creating revenue strategy to scale their businesses. I have the pleasure of moderating this discussion today with some amazing, talented folks. And so really quickly, I'll do a quick just a name introduction, and then I will pass it over to them to go a little bit further in depth as far as who they are and what companies they work for. But we'll start with, we have Esmina Hashman from Verizon. We also have Carlos Adame from Providence. We have Ami Worcester from Providence as well, and Will Smith from the city of Seattle. Thank you all for being on this panel today. I really do appreciate it. If we can, to get started, I will start with Asmina. If you want to go ahead and just let the audience know a little bit more about yourself and Verizon.
Thank you, Marcus. Hello, everyone. I am Asmina Hashim. I am part of our State Government Affairs team. I'm Executive Director of Public Policy and Community Engagement at Verizon.
Thank you, thank you. And I will actually kick over to Will.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm William Smith, Director of HR for the City of Seattle Information Technology Division. I've been with the city for almost 2.5 years, and we are doing some exciting and fun stuff. I can't wait to share it with you all.
Thank you, thank you. And I'll go over to Ami.
Hey folks, Ami Worcester. I'm here joining from Providence. I lead the service transformation team for the organization, which is focused on delivering new and different ways to leverage technology to help solve some of our problems and ultimately enable us to deliver care more efficiently for our patients.
Thank you, thank you. And Carlos?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus, and good afternoon, everybody. Carlos Adame, Chief Human Resource Officer for Providence. Very excited to be here this afternoon.
Sometimes it feels like tonight already.
It's a long day.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It looks like we have our co-moderator as well, Jennifer Carlson. So I'd like to introduce Jennifer to say a few words and introduce herself as well.
My apologies for the delay, as technology is not our friend as much as we love it. Wi-Fi had to be rebooted. I'm Jennifer Carlson. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder for Apprenti, and we're very happy to have everybody here today to have this really engaging conversation. And Marcus, I will not detract from you. I will hand it back.
Thank you. Well, I'm just excited for everyone to kind of to listen to the discussion that we've had. I've had a pleasure of meeting you all and having a discussion earlier this week. And I think that we all have a lot of rich information that we can share with this audience. And really the first question that I wanted to start with is that understanding that COVID has impacted this nation and the world, but more specifically has impacted the Black and Brown communities at a disproportionate rate. How has COVID caused your organizations to think differently about the workforce to help out with those type of communities? And to kick us off, Carlos, I think I'll start with you.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, COVID. We were unfortunate enough to have COVID patient number 1 in the United States at our hospital in Spokane, Washington. I think many of you know that was ground zero for COVID in the United States. So we have, unfortunately, a long experience with this. And yeah, I mean, Providence, interesting. We have a mission over a long period of time to serve those who are poor and vulnerable and really suffering. And unfortunately, COVID has had a disproportionately negative impact on communities of color. We know that, our country knows that. Our CEO and President Rod Hochman just announced an additional $50 million investment specifically for communities of color that we serve, and specifically to ensure that those communities receive the care, preventative care, aftercare that they need to get those to make sure it was more equitable. In terms of the diversity of our workforce, we're blessed to have diversity at every level. Our board is diverse, our executive levels diverse, our leadership ranks, and obviously the communities in which we serve. We have 115,000 caregivers. We call our employees caregivers to remind us of what we do and who we serve. So very, very glad about that. But we are going to continue to make sure that we have all the practices that allow all of our workforce to be successful.
Thank you, and that's really great that you all are doing amazing work, and it's and that you just taught me something new. I didn't know that patient one or ground zero was here in Spokane, so that is very new information for me. So I'll kick it over to William. William, I guess same question. How is your organization kind of grappling with COVID and how it's the disproportionate rate in which it's affecting the people of color communities?
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. COVID-19 has impacted us all in a variety of different ways. It is well documented that COVID has impacted Black and Brown people at a disproportionate high rate. Therefore, Seattle IT, we've always tried to stay ahead of the curve in a whole host of different ways, not just being in technology, but as it relates to our employees and the communities from which we serve. For instance, we quickly set up when the pandemic of COVID really hit, we quickly set up various trainings and tutorials to make sure that our employees and the people that we serve understood simple things, well, what we consider simple, things like a VPN network, how to access those things from your home, and then the necessary equipment that is needed to work from home, being that we were not going to be in the offices anymore. Then we quickly set up multiple meetings twice a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, to discuss cleaning protocols to make sure that our employees are safe in returning and coming back and forth. And when we talk specifically about the Black and Brown community, oftentimes it is connected to what many have called the digital divide, as to, in the world of IT, Black and Brown folks not having the access to a lot of the technologies that many of us might take for granted. So we have reached out to those demographics, as Seattle IT is in the service industry, not just for the people or the organizations within Seattle IT, but also, more importantly, our citizens. So we've reached out to see where the connections are correct in different demographics. We've sent out lectures. We've held almost virtual town halls. So we've tried to be really creative in Seattle for Seattle IT to make sure our citizens understand the importance of technology.
Thank you for that, Will. And then I'll ask the same question to you, Yasmina, and then we'll move on to a different question.
Sure, Marcus. So I think at Verizon, we had a really steady hand on the rudder that led us through the early part of COVID. I think one of the incidents that really shook us up as a corporation was the murder of George Floyd. And I think it brought to surface all of the issues that we have around racism and what is the role of business and how does it impact our workforce. So the first step in our company was really the reaction of our CEO. The very next day after the murder of George Floyd, he addressed the entire company and he was moved to tears. That set the tone. And, immediately our HR and our CEO, put together this workspaces, very safe workspaces, where our employees of color could come and speak with us frankly and openly about their life experiences and the racism that they had endured. So, that first step was listening and building empathy within our organization. So we had many sessions like that. And at this point, we are now rolling out updated training programs for all employees to really address inclusion and unconscious bias. So terminology like microaggressions and allyships, it is now commonly understood by all employees. We also acted with great transparency. And one of the first things we did was to report, and not report just internally, but make publicly available the gender and racial breakdown of our employees at every level in our organization. So while we lead the industry in diversity and equity, there is room for improvement. And we know that, inclusion is not the same as diversity and equity. We know that we must do better, and we have, acknowledged that inside our organization, and we with this early training and continued reinforcement, we intend to do better. We promise to do better. We have also joined the WTIA's Racial Diversity in Tech Initiative, which brings together a coalition of more than 60 technology companies in Washington state that is committed to addressing systemic racism in the workplace and establishing practices for inclusion in the workplace. As Verizon, we spend also over $1 billion with our diverse suppliers, that is women and people of color. And we are looking at it again to make sure that we are being inclusive, that we have representation from Black and Brown communities. So our actions not only are within our own walls, but we are also extending it beyond to our suppliers and even our entire tech industry.
That's great. If I can pick up from here, Azmina, I'd like to stay with you because you brought up a couple of interesting points as we talk about implicit bias and how we hire and in how we find the vendors that we work with, for example. If I could kind of pose this to the group, staying with you, Azmina, what kind of, as we think about diversity and talent differently, and based on this current landscape and the number of programs that are available out there, what is it specifically that you're looking at changing as an organization in all occupations? Are you looking at changing hiring requirements? Are you looking at onboarding people based on their skill sets as opposed to the resume that they're bringing to the table, educational requirements for roles? Obviously, that's more internally focused. And then sort of a sub to that is how are you identifying and really doing outreach proactively in finding vendors and minority-owned businesses to bring into the fold that can be service providers for our sector?
Right. So you have touched on many things there, Jennifer, but I think as Verizon, we've had a commitment to diversity for a long time, and we've been doing this for 20 years. And even after 20 years, I must say that, we're not perfect. We need to do so much more. And, but we started with recruitment many, many years ago. And really recruitment through non-traditional areas. And particularly, we have focused on the military, the veterans. We have focused on building a very large ecosystem of partners from where we can hire. So, we also have a very strong program of internally developing employees, giving them the skill sets right from however they come into the organization. There is a path to greater development. So, just to take one aspect, the military, for example. So Verizon has over 10,000 employees who are veterans. And our recruitment program has evolved, so that today, our employee base, so the racial diversity within our employee base mirrors the population of our country. So in terms of representation and diversity, we have done really well, I think. But as I said, that's not the end of the story. We really need to address inclusion. We need to address promotion and ensure that, we are pulling everybody. One of the areas that we've also focused on is the structures internally. So we have employee resource groups. We have one-on-one mentoring for veterans who are transitioning into the workforce. So when we bring in a diverse workforce, that's not the end of recruitment. We have structures and supports in place to help integrate them as well. And then as far as our suppliers go, obviously we have a lot of influence there. We are a large company. And so we have made this commitment, and we support it with our reporting. So we are very conscious on how much we spend and with who we spend, so that we are bringing women and people of color and giving them that opportunity to advance. One of the latest things we have done is, we issued a $1 billion bond, and the lead underwriter for it was a company that is led by, leaders in the Black community. It was the largest single bond that was ever given to anyone of people of color in the United States. So we continue to set new goals, achieve them, and be an example to the industry.
That's great. And if I could pose the same questions, I mean, part of the reason we have the diversity of companies represented here, or organizations, is, Verizon, obviously a tech company, but everybody's consuming tech and having similar issues across every area of their business. So from a healthcare perspective, Ami and Carlos, if you could share your thoughts on how you're shifting your requirements, and then William asking you the same thing from a government side.
Yeah, so thanks. And I'll try to go first, and maybe I'll pivot over to Carlos. So, Jennifer, one of the interesting things about your question, as I think about the state that we're in now with COVID and some of the challenges that's brought, is it also has opened up some opportunities for us, and trying to think about it from a positive perspective, and specifically around recruiting and looking for ways to continue to support our diversity goals. I'm sure, like many other organizations, we have seen a pretty significant shift to more of a remote workforce, especially when it comes to working within IT specifically. And so what that's done is it's actually brought new opportunities to us in terms of being able to look at a particular role that we're trying to fill, but eliminate some of those what would be historically geographic boundaries that we might be constrained to, and help to broaden our perspectives around who might be the best candidate to bring in for a particular role. And so that has been, I think, a pretty groundbreaking shift for us, and has allowed us to bring a lot more folks to the table and potentially create a lot more opportunities that might not have existed previously. So I've been really personally appreciative of that. I'm really passionate about making sure that we bring the right person in for the role. And historically, that can be a challenge, right? If you're looking for just candidates within the Seattle area or the Portland area, where there are certainly great candidates all across the country. And so I've been thankful in many ways that it's opened up that opportunity for us. And then you asked a question about kind of skills and resume, and I want to touch on that for a moment as well. I think it's really important to focus, and one of the things that we try to do is focus more on the person and what they bring to the table. When we talk about diversity, there's more than just the diversity of who those folks are from a people perspective, but we want diversity and experience as well. We want to make sure that we're incorporating the different backgrounds that folks bring to the table, because we're trying to solve new challenges today that we couldn't have predicted 5 years ago. And we need that diversity as well to help bring new thoughts and ideas to the table. And so certainly, skill and experience is always going to be a component to the conversation, but I think we look at it more through the lens of, who is smart, driven, nice. We want folks that are going to be able to come into the organization and add value. And I'm a big proponent that you find smart people and they can learn the technology, right? So let's not focus as much on, do they check all the check boxes for these different technology suites that they need to have had experience with, but do they bring the right kind of level of energy and commitment and passion and curiosity to the table that's going to create an environment that allows us to bring new solutions and solve new problems more quickly for our customers, our patients, and our caregivers. And as far as your question on community outreach, that's definitely an area that I'm going to have to rely on Carlos to be able to help me answer that question, but I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks, Sami. I think you did a fantastic job in hiring. The only thing I would add is, in addition to the remote work, we sent 18,000 caregivers home overnight in March when it really took off. We still haven't brought them back. We'll probably bring them back in a hybrid capacity, and probably not until mid next year at the earliest, until it's really safe to do so. And so that did open up opportunities, and we are spending more time and effort on recruiting from historically Black colleges and universities. We are using search firms that have an expertise, deep expertise in history, in attracting and working with and serving and making sure that people of color are successful at all levels, executive, mid-level management. And so that's fantastic. We have, similar to Azmina, we call them caregiver resource groups all across the geography that we serve. They're growing. I was just on one at 7 o'clock this morning, and we have amazing executive sponsorship for everyone, and they're expanding. And what I was proud of our executive team when this, when George Floyd was murdered and really every company responded, or most companies responded, was they wanted to know how they could be part of the solution, right? Our history, our mission is aligned with helping people, but what more could we do? And it's interesting, we give away about $1.5 billion in community benefit annually, most of it in communities of color. And so that's a big number of giving free healthcare and other benefits, housing, et cetera, to help people who need it. And I wouldn't say we've changed our hiring requirements, but we certainly are using different pools to recruit from to make sure that we maintain and even increase our diversity.
Great. And from a government perspective, Will?
Yes, from a government perspective, fortunately, there are stipulations that are set before we enter into any type of contract. For instance, we have a stigma that we call it WIMBY, Women and Minority Black-owned Businesses, that we have to take it through sort of a checklist to make sure those things have been addressed before we go outside of that to enter into a contract with anyone. In terms of talent acquisition and who we bring into the organization, we operate as a city from this model called the T model, if you will, talent, experience, and alignment. And within that is embedded all sorts of diversity quotas that we have to meet in order to move forward with the candidate. And it's important that not only do we go through these checks and balances, but we are consistent about them and that we're sincere about them. And not only is it from that lens, but what is it when that candidate walks through the door or enters into that Zoom call, do they see sitting across the table, and who they're interviewing with? So that interview panel needs to be diverse as well. And so we take extreme pride and commitment into making sure those things are in place. The other thing from an organizational standpoint that we have really tailored to is this idea of always being in a hurry. Oftentimes, I think in our angst to want to fill a role so quickly and the close time and all those neat data things that we like to collect, we do miss out on the opportunity of finding maybe that diverse candidate that maybe didn't know that that role was open for to be recruited for, and spending a little bit more time, more concentrated effort in making sure that we are going out into the communities in a variety of different ways and places, not just your typical places in which you post your jobs, maybe on the LinkedIn's and what have you, not saying that there's anything wrong with LinkedIn, but making sure that you are thinking outside the box in terms of recruitment to attract more people to your organization. And the other thing that we are doing at the city that I find quite fabulous, and again, it's more centered into what we already do as an organization, is we have this initiative called the Rsji Initiative, which is the Race and Social Justice Initiative. And everything that we do, we call it RSJI toolkit. Should be governed through that lens. And it is for the sole purpose of making sure that we put equity first, diversity and inclusion into everything that we do, and the importance of that, and making sure that everyone in management and across the city know that's our framework and that's our lens.
Thank you for that, Will. Like, so I'm hearing a lot of great things that are being done from the healthcare, the tech space, and government space. And just to kind of like recap or summarize a few of the things that I heard were like moving away from like a work experience to some degree, and looking at the actual person individually, as well as their characteristics and their ability to learn, which is really, really awesome. Also going away to, or moving into more of like a remote work type environment. So not just having folks that live in the Pacific Northwest or have to live in the Pacific Northwest, but ultimately looking elsewhere, also recruiting from HBCUs. And I think there are 107 HBCUs across the country, which is a valuable pool right there to choose from. And then just looking at other ways from a monetarily standpoint to benefit the community as well. Those are all really great, I guess, things that you all are doing. Anyone have any like, were there any questions that you all have with one another regarding, how that looks or how that's taken shape, or how did you even like get out of the starting blocks to implement some of these changes?
This is Carlos. I'm happy to take a stab at that. And, it was interesting when George Floyd was killed, in addition to our leadership just jumping in and saying, what can we do? Our leaders were asking for resources on how to have uncomfortable conversations, literally conversations they had never had in the workplace on race and justice. And that's one of our founding values is justice. So a small team, myself included, really literally, and we had some resources, but not much. And so we created, and I just created one, and my colleague, put some more resources, and we sent that out, and oh my God, it got the most hits on our intranet. People loved it. It's like, okay, we're not making it political, but we're still having these conversations. How can we do it respectfully? It changed the way we did business in a good way, in advancing. So, in terms of doing diversity differently, I think for us, equity and inclusion, just as important as the diversity of our workforce. And we're literally going through every process in our business to make sure we root out anything that can get in the way of somebody, of anyone. And it's painstaking, but it's fantastic work. And the community and the workforce will feel it. But we will never stop innovating to make sure that this is a great place to work for all people.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Carlos and panelists and everyone, I think one of the disservices that we can do, what I call in this work, is looking at solely just the Black and brown folks to be the leader in this space in terms of sending that message or delivering that message. Everyone needs to be a part in that. And I think oftentimes, especially in organizations, when things of racial sensitivity happens, oftentimes it's, hey, well, this Black or brown person will have the better context than I do. Therefore, it's their responsibility and burden to carry that message. And it is not. It is the burden and responsibility of all of us. And so oftentimes when things happen in society, I know they tell us to separate, your work from your home. And I've always felt like that was inaccurate, because how can you, so you're asking us to be robots, and people can't do that. So what we see happen, materialize in society often and many times will spill over into the organization. But once we're past that emotional stage of atrocities that we see out in society, how are we still carrying that message? And I think that's the place where it becomes transformative, because you get a chance to be now strategic about that conversation. For instance, an end result to the things that were happening in this country in regards to the killing of unarmed Black men, we set up a couple of discussions in Seattle IT called Let's Talk About Race. And we had those discussions, not with anyone having some superior amount of knowledge about how to have these conversations, but we decided to be brave and venture into the conversation. And so we've had 2 of those so far, and they've been some most impactful conversations. You know, people have cried, people have laughed, people have disagreed, but we did it under the context that we had a basic premise, and that was to get some level of understanding of one another and how we're going to go about and doing our work.
I absolutely love that. I think that the more that we can have these open dialogue conversations, that's how we actually move our country and our society forward. And so it's important. Like, they're uncomfortable and they're meant to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. I think that we'll actually end up, getting so much further along when we have these tough, uncomfortable conversations. I remember when George Floyd was murdered, and I was trying to worry about my community and still put on the face or facade that I could actually still get work done. And it was just a bit too much for me. And I honestly had to just let my company know, hey, I'm leading revenue here, but at the same time, I'm dealing with external extremities that I need to address and need to be a part of because it affects my day-to-day. So once I was able to put that message out there, the team and the organization actually did kind of rally behind, and we started to come up with actual actionable items that we could do, which was really important for us. So yeah.
So if I can go off script a little in asking the next question, because I think it's in follow-up to everything we're talking about here. We talk about where we can recruit differently, how we can hire differently, how much we're going to value skill sets. Those are all external to who we are, and bringing them in, which is certainly the first step. But as we run an apprenticeship program, I can tell you firsthand, our experience has been that the onboarding and integrating into the workforce people who with different backgrounds, different doesn't mean lesser, but that's not always received that way internally inside the company. How are you managing internal staff to the idea of remote work? People that we may be a regionally based organization who are going to hire people not in the region, to we're now not sitting next to the person I can ask the question of, to I'm bringing people on that don't have the same credentials necessarily that I worked hard to get. And we've encountered a lot of challenges and animosity around that, and having to do coaching internally to get people up to speed. How are your companies and organizations looking at that, and what are you doing to address that internal difference?
I'll take a stab at that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to say, I'll take a stab at that and allow others to comment as well. But, I think from my perspective, at least, when I'm reflecting on your question, one of the first things that comes to mind to me is focusing more on trust, starting with trust. And so, especially in a remote work environment, we have to trust each other to be a part of the team and be accountable for the things that we have to drive forward within the organization. And I think creating and starting with a foundation of trust within the team helps to enable the downstream impacts that you want to see. So, creating conditions where folks know that they are trusted and empowered and enabled to go out and do good work. And we're spending less time focusing on, well, what time did you log in, and have you checked all these check boxes on this list of things that I expect you to do, and focusing more on the outputs of that work, making sure that we're having honest conversations, making sure that folks really understand what it is that they're here to do, right? So having that why is extremely important for us. And I think that if folks understand what they're here to do and why their role exists and why we trust and rely on them to move work forward, there's a lot more, at least in my experience, of that intrinsic drive with folks to go out and do good work because they know that the rest of the team is relying on them. So I think creating that kind of environment is foundational to having a team and an organization that can be successful, especially as we work in new ways in the future.
Great, thanks. Azmina?
Yes, I think I touched on it a little bit, that the story doesn't end with recruitment. You have to pay attention to integration. And of course, in this time of COVID, it is even more important when somebody who's new starts remotely. So, we have to have systems of support from management. We have to have buddy systems from within the team. But then we also have, and we are very fortunate that we have our employee resource groups and the way they're structured. So the way we have structured our employee resource groups are that they are really focused around people of color and marginalized communities. So, they have that focus already. We know where that group of people exists. So, and those employee resource groups are given 4 mandates. One is career, the other customer, culture, and community. And that community is within both the company and outside the company. So when we have new folks, especially those from non-traditional backgrounds, it becomes very important for them to find community. And we have structures that have created that open and welcome community that can help further integrate them. So, the other powerful thing I think we have is conversation. So Marcus touched on it a little bit. Even though we are a large company of 135,000 people, we have a half hour 3 times a week where we can all get on board and, there is a conversation going on, important conversations. But one of the conversations we hear about within the company is also about career pathways. And, you will hear about leaders, great leaders who talk about where they started from at the company. They started at the bottom. They started in a completely different role, and how they managed to then acquire those skills and how they self-developed to move up the ladder and to really, get to their position. So that storytelling, that sharing also is so important to integrate people and for them to feel empowered that really at Verizon you can be what you want to be. You just have to find your path, but there are many paths available.
Great. Anything else there? Okay. Marcus?
Yeah, so so you touched on this in the meeting, which was really good regarding, how do you move people from entry level in an organization through to the senior type roles within organizations. I'm curious, and this is more so open to anybody. I think Azmina, I think you were the one that mentioned this around your advisory board, or it may have been Carlos, around your advisory board being more diverse, et cetera. I'm curious, have there been any plans around that aspects to move into a certain number or percentage for your advisory and executive leadership to be in a diverse state? I know that I've seen some organizations that have said, okay, by 2022 or by 2024, we plan to have our leadership being X percentage diverse.
Yeah, it's a great question, Marcus. I'll speak for Providence. No, we don't have specific targets. I think part of it is because we're already above what people might call the standard, right? 13.4% Black people in the United States have, X number of whatever. And I love how our CIO put it in an open town hall, literally right after, things happened and people were anxious. And somebody said, why don't we get to, whatever? And his answer was great. He goes, yeah, we have work to do. I think Azmina mentioned the same thing, but we're doing well. And why do we stop there? Why is 13.4% the right number? Why isn't it 15 or 17 or 20? So back to, if you feel like you're doing the right thing and your workforce is a representative of the communities you serve, and you continue to have that as a focused effort, a tenet, good things will happen. And again, it's not just our advisory board, this is actually our board of directors. And it's the performance and the direction of our CEO. So they're the ones really running the company. And so it's just a blessing to see the blend of backgrounds and, back to what Ami was saying, perspectives, all driven for a common cause. That's really powerful.
Yeah. Same question to anybody else. I know that Ami and Carlos are at the same company, so.
Yeah, so the question, right? How do you move people from entry level to senior roles? And I think at Verizon, one of the strong elements that's communicated to you right from the beginning is that your self-development is in your hands. So, people, everyone has responsibility to look for development opportunities within the company. And then the company itself provides you with so many resources to ensure that you have the opportunities to seek out whether you want technical development, leadership development, or opportunities to even move laterally or as well and gain breadth as well. So I think that is all very good. But then in addition, we do have, in the tech industry, an underrepresentation of women and people of color. And so what we have done there is we actually have separate career development tracks that really focus on women and on people of color, right? So that they have that extra boost to help them through. So in addition to that, we have mentorship and sponsorship. So, it's very important that, in communities that are not necessarily self-promoting or are not comfortable with self-promoting, that they have a sponsorship where their manager or their leaders will say, hey, so-and-so accomplished this. So, sometimes, we hear that women in tech are not comfortable with promoting themselves. But the work, that doesn't mean that the work should be ignored, right? We have this allyship. We have to promote that work. We have to recognize them for what they bring. So we have a very strong culture in that. I think we also have something else which is very important, which is accountability. We publish our numbers by job level. That builds an accountability. It's very transparent. It becomes very transparent to see where we are falling behind. So, culture, accountability, the promotion, the support, all of that is very, very important, I think, for those historically underrepresented people. As far as our board is concerned, we have a very diverse board. 33% of it is Black, 33% of it is women. So we take extraordinary efforts to make sure that, we have diversity and that we are, continuing to do better.
Sure. Ami?
Yeah, so, with regard to the question of how we move folks from entry level to senior level, I think one of the other things just conceptually that we try to do is understand what that individual's career goals are, right? Because everyone has different goals and objectives. And so kind of functionally within our organization, we try to, so there was some conversation about having those open dialogues with leaders and understanding what their backgrounds are and what brought them to the place that they are today. We have some similar functionality like that within the organization, which I think is really interesting. But in addition to that, we also build job shadowing programs within IT to help get folks that are in more entry-level positions exposure to a number of different roles and technologies. Because oftentimes, I think like with many roles, when you're in an entry-level position, you don't necessarily know what else is out there within that industry, and you might have an interest that develops just through the exposure to those other roles and technologies and parts of the organization. So we try to foster that. I think we also try to really have a direct conversation about understanding how we can support that person's goals and tying those into their career development plan. So for any role within IT, generally what we do is we build out and we try to make it extremely clear and transparent to the individual how they can move through that program. So when someone is in a junior role, how do they move to the next role? What are the types of skills and experience and qualities that we're looking for someone in that next position? So it's not an opaque conversation, and folks have a really accessible amount of information to understand where they are today and what they should be targeting to move into those next levels. And by having that discussion about what their personal objectives are, we can also be looking for where can we potentially plug someone into a role when we do have those openings exist. I'm sure like Verizon and like the city of Seattle, we're always looking for those opportunities to take someone who is a go-getter, is passionate, is smart, is willing, is capable, and help move them into that next position, because we benefit from that just as much as the candidate benefits. And so we want to try to create those springboards into the next position.
So thank you. I think that's a great holding point for us. We've got a few folks in the attendee group that are asking questions of us that we're going to pose. So if we can wrap up the formal part of this, and then we'll move to the audience Q&A. The central theme, I think, and the reason why we've gotten lucky in having all three of your groups here as companies is because you are all culturally very self-aware of the communities you represent, have very engaging diversity hiring initiatives, and have been very proactive for a long time about and consciously making the decision about how to represent the communities that you're serving. And so that leads to obviously best practices and ultimately culture. And the culture of the companies that you are here speaks volumes to how you've moved the needle to be reflective of your communities. If you had one thing that you could give to everybody as a takeaway about how to get the culture of any company moving in the right direction, other than the obvious executive buy-in, what other things can people be thinking about doing to help push themselves into the position that you're already in?
I would say, Jennifer, would be skill building. Because skill building is a direct connection to investment. And the employees see that the organization is committed and well-intended into their success, and that they're putting resources behind the development of the staff. I think it was the one mover within Seattle IT that really changed our culture around seeing that we created a talent development plan. We created what we call a talent seminar where we had tech leaders and different speakers come to just talk about IT. And those sorts of things employees see and say, okay, well, our organization really does care about us, and they do want to see us succeed. They feel like that the organization is in the development with them, not just them solely alone. So again, one word, I would say skill development.
Great.
I'll go next, Jennifer. I mean, a couple of things. Number one, if it's in the company's DNA that this is important, it will happen. And if it isn't, it's going to be very difficult the bigger the company gets to turn that around. It can, but it's just going to take tremendous effort. In terms of how people can get to senior level roles, I think go back to what one of the panelists said about all development is self-driven. Like you have to take the initiative to figure out what the development process is, work with your leader and others, maybe get mentorship opportunities, because that's super helpful for people to see what maybe they don't know or don't understand how to get ahead. And then really, to me, the baseline is doing outstanding work. You have to do great work, and I do a lot of coaching, and I teach, and I say that's baseline. You have to figure out what your job is, do it to the best of your abilities, and then begin to be intentional, right? Put your hand up and say, I would like more responsibility. How can I do it? And you'd be surprised when somebody states that. And I heard another panelist say, sometimes in certain communities, we're not, as bold as that. Well, that's where maybe some mentorship or other, resource groups can certainly help. I was just on the Latinx resource group for us this morning, and that was one of the topics. And then really an organization that supports that. And it will happen. We have a lot of long tenured senior leaders that did start at the front line. So we can point to examples that it does work. And it really happens one person at a time, both from a caregiver process and also a leader perspective, right? All eyes are on us watching what we do.
One thing that I did as
So I think.
Oh, go ahead, Asmina.
Sorry, yeah, it's a quick answer. So I agree. Opportunity. The opportunity has to exist. The culture has to support it, and then I would also add, transparency, reporting. Right. It is important. You have to be able to see it. You have to be able to judge it.
Yeah, and what I just want to piggyback off what everyone else said, basically around the accountability of the person just stating that they want to grow in those areas, but then also the leader or the manager taking a interest in helping them grow. So as an executive myself, I've been able to do something called the 80-20 rule, which I give folks 80% of their day-to-day tasks that they do, but then 20% of the time we are growing in an area for you to replace me. So therefore, I'll take you into some of my leadership meetings where I'll have you kind of take notes while you see how I interact. Maybe on some of my executive board meetings, I may have you sit in every once in a while. But ultimately, I'm showing you ways in which to groom you to take over my position, because that is the ultimate goal.
Great. So I think we have a few questions from attendees. I will pop in the first one. Mature worker, how does passion overweigh a formal degree with a mature worker? So you've got somebody who's not fresh out of school. How do you use, or how do you identify that grit and tenacity that they need to learn and grow into a new position versus the formal degree requirements that we've historically looked at?
Yeah, so I would say that we really have a lot to do in terms of inclusion. And when you think about inclusion, it is about sexism, it's about racism, it's about ageism. But we have to learn to include everyone. And I think that is where when we look at the state of our industries, across the board, it is certainly an area that we are learning more about, and I think that American business is responding to it. So definitely an area of growth, particularly in our country, we have an aging workforce, and we have to accept the fact that these are people who are still vital to our business. They are productive. That we shouldn't be writing them off, that we need to continue to invest in them. But, it comes with inclusion. And so inclusion covers a lot of areas, not just race, but everything, everybody.
I would just love the passion, bring it. We can always find a place. Certain jobs, obviously, you're going to be a doctor, you probably should have a medical degree, but that notwithstanding, I agree 100% the inclusion. Finding a role in an organization of our size for someone who has passion and energy, and ageism absolutely is a thing. And those progressive companies don't see that as you can't do, or you're unavailable, or you're less than, or you're about to retire. Why would I? No, bring them. I'd rather have you for 5 years doing your fantastic work and passing on the wisdom that you've had throughout your life.
And then the other piece to that is, that passion and wisdom that you come with, a lot of those skills are transferable. And so it becomes beneficial. It becomes even more of an asset to an organization. So by no means would I ever consider that a misnomer or disclaimer for not moving someone forward or them not giving them opportunity.
And from my experience, those are like typically apprenticeships and things of that nature are my go-to first. Like I'm seeking out those individuals first because I know the traditional backgrounds, like they will come in, they will find a way to apply and they will ultimately, be in the interview process and potentially hired. But I want to seek folks out that are just eager to learn. And if it's not like a doctor position or a some kind of technical position where you have to have a lot of experience, then there's ways in which that you can train a software, you can train on certain skill sets, and a lot of it is transferable. So I'm looking in those directions first, and then supplementing with the traditional backgrounds.
Yeah, Marcus, I'll just add on that as well and totally echo what you said. I think that these are multidimensional conversations, right? So when you're having a conversation with someone, certainly whether or not they have a college degree is an element to the discussion, but when you're talking about the kind of how do you balance passion versus does someone have a degree, I tend to focus more on let's have a real conversation. You can figure out, and that passion is demonstrable, right? So if you're somebody that maybe you don't have a degree, but you have a passion, are you going out? Are you reading about what's happening within that space? Are you up to speed on what kind of technologies are emerging? Are you able to have an informed conversation? Can you demonstrate that this is something that you have an interest and a passion about? Because frankly, I am more inclined to bring someone like that onto the team than someone who just says, yes, I have a college degree, so you should hire me, right? Now, if I can find someone who has the energy and the interest, and we can sit down and we can have an hour conversation about what's cool and what's emerging in the world, in the industry. Why are they interested in a particular technology? Are they pursuing certifications or education on their own in lieu of a degree? All of these things are dimensions to the conversation that will create value for you as a candidate and make you more appealing to someone who's hiring for a particular role. So I would just encourage you to, try to demonstrate that interest and that passion in the conversations as you're going out and you're looking for a career in a new organization.
Agree more. And then the last thing I wanted to just mention with regards to like, how does that kind of like come out in the interview process? I think it does come out kind of naturally for the most part, but you can also, as the interviewer, you can ask certain questions to probe to see if you can pull a little bit of that out, depending on the personality type that you're dealing with as well. So oftentimes, if someone is maybe passionate but doesn't exude that, then I'll ask them to walk me through kind of what they've done to research this certain kind of skill set or requirement. And the more that they're able to talk about that, that'll give me enough information to know as well.
Right. The probative process.
Yes. Were there any other questions in the Q&A? I wanted to make sure. I think we have like 5 minutes left or so.
There was a question, I don't know if it was sent to me privately or about, we're talking about energy and passion, and how do you vet for that, right? How do you measure it? Is there a test? And I responded privately, I just said, it will come out. Like the experience, the body language, the word choice, the posture, all of that will exude. If somebody's just being who they are and it's authentic and it's genuine, you can pick up that and you can see the courage that they've demonstrated in their experiences, the overcoming, the nobody asked me to, but I led this, right? I started this on behalf of Black. It comes through. And so if that really is important, and it sounds like most of the panelists it is, we look for that.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I think on the opposite end is that when you're dealing with like a personality that's more of an introverted, like that's where that probing comes from. Because I have had those kind of conversations as well, where I'm like, I see that they're passionate, but it's not like actually coming through in the way that they deliver it. So I just keep probing a little bit more and make them feel comfortable. And then that shines through ultimately.
So if I could say one more thing, as we talk about race, which is a very important topic, one of the challenges that we want to really work on is how do we create new talent. And, for us, it has always been through community partnerships, because there are people who are very hard to reach, especially in the Black and Brown community, in the low income communities. And it's really important for us to bring them on board. And, through partnerships like the one we have with Apprenti, we try and address that. But, I think we have made a bigger commitment as a result of everything that is going on. One is to really double down on it and prepare 500,000 individuals by 2030 for tech jobs. And we have created a partnership with Generation to reskill Americans who have been laid off because of COVID, who are underemployed, who are underskilled and want to get reskilled. And, it is a program that we are just starting to roll out, including here in Seattle. So I do want to encourage everybody who's listening, who is looking for opportunity, go to the website, usa.generation.org to find out more and get in touch with the organization. We would love to see you there.
I think that's a great segue to the question that I have is, and Azmina, you just did a great job of answering it, but how can people get in touch with you and your organization regarding, opportunities, just opportunities in general? And Azmina, you did a great job of answering that. So I'll kick it over to Will.
Yeah, you can certainly reach out to me directly. William.smith@seattle.gov. Or you can go to the cityofseattle.gov.jobs, and all of our jobs are posted there, but more than happy to engage with you, email me personally to get you in the right direction.
Great, and then Carlos?
And for Verizon.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, for Verizon, of course, it's verizon.com, and then you can look at the careers section to see what is available. And I'm also available on LinkedIn by my name.
Awesome.
Yeah, and for Providence, it's providencescalling.jobs. And you could always go on the providence.com or providence.org website to find out more about our jobs. And there are many. We hire about 25,000 people a year. So be persistent.
And I guess, all right, well, I guess the same as Carlos. Anything else you want to add though?
Always welcome to reach out on LinkedIn. I'll put my link in the chat here for folks as well.
And that's what I just did. I just added my LinkedIn profile to the chat for you all to connect with me. And I, work at Cultured Perspective. So Marcus at culturedperspective.com, or just reach out via LinkedIn, and I can direct you. But definitely passionate about helping out marginalized communities. So if there's any mentorship opportunities, I'm more than happy to explore that with people as well.
So just to wrap things up, and I'm glad, Marcus, you're available. I put my email out there as well, and it's apprenticareers.org if you'd like to connect for either hiring or as an applicant, and we can happily connect you to a number of companies who are in the area and looking for apprentices. This has been recorded. It will be posted both at the Workforce Development Council's website and at WTIA.org. And we will be using this information. I believe Megan Generations will also be posting the content. So this will be available for all to reference. And we appreciate everybody coming here today and participating in this. And this was a really rich conversation, and certainly gives us a lot of other conversations still to come, as most of these are very meaty topics that require a double click. So I'm sure you will be asked to come back, as well as others, for future conversations. Marcus?
I just want to say thank you to the panel, Asmina, Will, Ami, Carlos, thank you. And thank you all so much. Jennifer, thank you for co-moderating with me. This has been a pleasure. I've taken some nuggets from you all, so I'm going to start to add a little bit of that to my repertoire as well. So, and attendees, thank you all for the amazing questions. They have really been cool to see how you're thinking about, entering these workspaces.
Yeah, thanks for including us.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.